All right, welcome everyone to the deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a really close look at a book that's genuinely helped countless people find, a bit more clarity and purpose. We're talking about The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma. And our mission here is basically to explore a detailed review covering its main ideas, how it's put together, Sharma's unique style, and, well, the impact it's had.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Came out back in 97, and it sort of carved its own path, didn't it? It's not quite your standard self-help book, but it's not pure fiction either. Sharma blends them. And that makes some, frankly, quite profound ideas feel really accessible because they're wrapped up in this story. It's basically a journey, isn't it? Finding meaning, finding balance in, well, a pretty hectic world.
Okay, so let's unpack that journey a bit.
Yeah.
The main character is Julian Mantle. He starts off as this super successful lawyer, but he's completely stressed out, right? Living the high life, but it's clearly costing him. And then the big turning point, he has a heart attack. Right there in court. And that moment, that crisis, it just forces him to stop and rethink, well, everything.
Absolutely. And that rethinking leads to a pretty radical change. Julian literally just disappears, vanishes from his old life. Then months later, he comes back, but he's completely transformed, calm, vibrant, looks younger almost, full of this newfound wisdom. The story goes he learned all this from a mystical group of monks, the Sages of Sivana, way up in the Himalayas. And that whole story framework, that narrative, is really key. It takes potentially complex stuff, philosophy, spirituality, and makes it, well, digestible. Engaging even, because it's tied to Julian's own experience.
Right. It's not just abstract theory.
Exactly.
So Julian doesn't just keep this transformation to himself. He returns and starts sharing these big life lessons with his old friend and colleague, John. And through John, he's basically sharing them with you, the listener. The whole point is how to live a life with more purpose, more joy, and crucially, more balance.
Which naturally leads to the question, okay, how? How do you actually do that? And Julian's teachings are kind of boiled down into these 7 virtues for an enlightened life. Each one uses these memorable metaphors in the book. They act as practical guides, really, for anyone wanting to make some, real personal changes.
Yeah, I'm keen to get into these. This feels like the real meat of the book, the practical takeaways. So the first virtue Julian talks about is mastering your mind. What does that actually involve according to the book?
Right. So the key idea here is that mastering your mind isn't just something that happens, it's an active practice, like training a muscle.
Yeah.
Daily work. The book goes into techniques like focusing on positive thoughts, using visualization, building concentration. It even gives you specific tools like the Heart of the Rose exercise, which sounds a bit mystical, but it's actually a concrete way to practice visualization. It grounds the abstract idea, makes it doable, especially if you're new to, say, meditation.
Okay, that makes sense. A practical anchor, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So once you start working on the mind, where does Sharma go next? Purpose,
Right.
following your purpose. How does he suggest you even figure out what that is? A lot of people find that idea pretty daunting.
That's a really good point. It is daunting for many. Sharma talks about setting really clear goals, but it's more than just like writing a list. It's about chasing those goals with real courage, making sure your actions line up with what you feel your mission is. And maybe understanding that purpose isn't always something you just find ready-made. It's
Yeah.
something you kind of build through deliberate action over time.
Okay, building it. I like that. Then there's practice Kaizen. I've heard that term in business context.
Continuous improvement.
Yeah, Sharma applies it personally. This idea of constant, never-ending improvement. How does that translate to daily life?
Well, what's powerful there is that it shifts the focus from needing huge breakthroughs to just making small, steady progress.
Yeah.
Every day, it involves, self-discipline, committing to always be learning, pushing your boundaries just a little bit consistently. The idea is that those small steps, done over and over, add up to big changes eventually.
Right, the compound effect, sort of. And discipline seems key there, which leads nicely into the next one. Live with discipline.
The book uses that analogy of willpower being like a muscle.
Yeah, it's a great analogy, I think, because it takes the mystery out of willpower. It suggests it's not this fixed thing you either have or you don't. Instead, it's something you strengthen bit by bit. Through small acts of courage, small commitments you keep. You build momentum, build self-trust, starting small.
Okay, that feels achievable. Now the next one, respecting your time. Oof, we all struggle with this, right? The book calls time your most precious commodity. Easy to say, but how do Julian's ideas help you actually say no to distractions? Especially with emails, notifications, family demands, everything pulling at you. Yeah, it's the modern dilemma, isn't it? The book argues that respecting time isn't just about being efficient, it's a fundamental shift in how you see your time. It's about recognizing that every time you say yes to something unimportant, you're implicitly saying no to something that is important, something aligned with your purpose. So it encourages really focusing on high value stuff and, yeah, getting good at saying no. Framing no not as negative, but as a strategic yes to your priorities.
Strategic, yes. I like that framing. Okay, virtue number 6 feels quite outward focused. Selflessly serve others, living for more than just yourself.
Exactly. It talks about the huge impact of just daily acts of kindness, simple things. And it emphasizes that contributing to others doesn't just help them, it actually enriches your own life significantly. It connects your personal fulfillment back to the community, to others.
A sort of virtuous cycle.
Precisely.
And the final one, number 7, embrace the present. Living in the now. We hear this a lot, but what's Sharma's angle?
Well, it's presented not just as another thing to do, like be mindful, but as a real shift in perspective. It's about actively cultivating gratitude for what you have right now and consciously savoring moments as they happen, moving away from always chasing the next thing and finding richness right where you are, recognizing that constant striving can make you miss the life you're actually living.
Wow, okay, so those are the 7 virtues. Powerful stuff. Given all that, let's talk about the book's style. It's definitely not your typical self-help layout, is it? No bullet points right away.
Yeah.
Sharma uses that story, weaving the lessons into dialogues, these little parables. The overall feel is quite simple, very motivational, easy to get into, which probably explains why it's so good for people just starting out with personal development. Anna.
Absolutely. That accessibility is arguably its biggest strength. It's engaging because it's a story. It makes these sometimes heavy concepts feel, well, less dry than reading a textbook. And like we touched on, it gives you actual tools to try the rose exercise, visualization techniques, goal-setting ideas, mantras, practical stuff. Plus, it looks at the whole person, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual growth. It's holistic. And, it taps into ancient wisdom, Eastern philosophies, but translates them in a way that feels relevant for modern life.
Okay, so those are definitely strong points. But no book pleases everyone. To keep things balanced, what are some of the criticisms? What do reviewers or readers sometimes push back on?
True, there are definitely recurring critiques. Some people find it a bit repetitive. They feel like certain ideas or dialogues get stretched out, maybe said in slightly different ways multiple times.
Okay, yeah, I can see that maybe happening in a narrative style.
hmm Another point is the idea that it might be oversimplified. Critics sometimes argue it takes these really deep, complex spiritual traditions and kind of boils them down into maybe slightly simplistic life hacks.
Like spirituality light.
Sort of, yeah. And then there's the tone. Some readers find Julian's advice, his whole transformed persona, maybe a bit too perfect, a bit preachy or sermon-like, a little idealistic, perhaps.
Right. So how should we weigh those cons? Do they kind of invalidate the book's message for people?
I don't think so. Not necessarily. It depends on the reader, right? For the intended audience, people may be feeling stuck looking for an introduction to these ideas. Those cons often seem pretty minor compared to the inspiration or the practical tips they get. It's meant to be an accessible starting point, a gateway, maybe not the definitive text on, say, Himalayan mysticism.
That makes sense. It's about meeting people where they are. So thinking about that audience, who is this deep dive and who is this book really for? If you're listening now, how do you know it's right for you?
Yeah, stepping back, it seems perfect for people who are maybe new to personal development or mindfulness, so, just dipping their toes in. Also, anyone feeling burned out, maybe a bit disillusioned with just chasing money or status, people wondering, is this all there is? And definitely readers who like that kind of spiritual fiction vibe. If you enjoyed, say, The Alchemist, this might resonate. Ultimately, it's for anyone really looking for a bit more purpose, clarity, or trying to find a better balance between work and life. It's a guide for that kind of self-discovery journey.
Okay. And the review we based this on gave it a pretty solid score, right? 8.5 out of 10. And I liked how it called the book a mirror, something that makes you pause, look at your own life, and think about the path you're on. A powerful gateway to transformation was the phrase used.
Yeah, that sums it up well. I think the core takeaway is that The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari really is a thoughtful, well-structured, and kind of soulful guide if you're looking to reconnect with yourself, maybe redefine what success looks like for you, and build a life with more meaning.
So let's leave everyone with a final thought. Think about Julian Mantle's journey and those 7 virtues we unpacked. Which single virtue, if you had to pick just one, might be the most powerful starting point for your own journey right now, towards maybe a more purposeful, more joyful life? What's one small act of discipline, maybe? or one area of focus from those 7 that could make a real difference for you starting today? Something to think about.